Trump says Iran is begging for a deal, but Washington says it isn't negotiating. So what exactly is happening in the Strait of Hormuz? And why, after nearly 6 months of war, does the world's most important energy choke point remain at the center of the confrontation? President Donald Trump is now insisting that Iran is desperate for an agreement. "I don't want to meet, they do," Trump wrote on Truth Social, claiming Tehran is effectively begging Washington for a deal. But at the same time, the Trump administration says it is not negotiating with Iran. Instead, Washington is doubling down on economic pressure, while maintaining a naval blockade around Iranian ports. Trump says the strategy is working. He claims Iran's economy is collapsing, its government is struggling to pay its soldiers, and Tehran is under enormous financial pressure. The White House has also launched what it calls Operation Economic Outcast, warning countries and companies that continue doing business with Iran that they could face U.S. penalties. But there is one enormous problem. Iran still controls the other side of the equation, the Strait of Hormuz. The waterway connects the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. Before the war, roughly 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas shipments passed through the strait. Today, that traffic has collapsed. And that is why the battle over Hormuz is about far more than Iran. It is about global energy supplies, shipping, insurance costs, and the economic pressure being felt far beyond the Middle East. Trump says the strait is open. He claims U.S. forces have protected hundreds of commercial vessels, and that American forces have even cleared mines from the main shipping lanes. U.S. Central Command says roughly 1 out of 500 commercial vessels, carrying around 750 million barrels of crude, have transited the waterway under U.S. protection in recent months, but normal shipping has not returned. Reuters reports that traffic remains dramatically below pre-war levels, while only a handful of commercial vessels have recently crossed the strait on some days. So when Trump says the Strait of Hormuz is open, there is an important distinction. The physical waterway may be navigable, but normal commercial traffic has clearly not returned. And Iran wants to keep it that way, unless Washington meets its conditions. Iranian Security Chief Mohsen Rezai says Tehran is preparing a list of demands for reopening the strait, and those demands go far beyond shipping. Iran wants the United States to lift its blockade, ease sanctions, and compensate Tehran for losses caused by the war. But most importantly, Iran says the broader regional war must end. That means an end to military operations in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. Iran is also demanding an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon and an end to Israeli attacks on Syria. In other words, Tehran is trying to turn the Strait of Hormuz into leverage over the entire regional conflict. And there is another development that could make this even more complicated. Iran and Oman have been working on a temporary shipping arrangement. The proposal would create a corridor through the strait using both Iranian and Omani territorial waters. Iran says such a mechanism could allow commercial shipping to resume while preserving what Tehran describes as the sovereign rights of both countries. But Washington is not enthusiastic. The Trump administration has made clear that it does not want Iran determining the conditions under which international shipping moves through Hormuz. And Trump has gone even further. He has threatened Oman if Muscat interferes with the American effort to reopen the waterway on Washington's terms. That threat is significant because Oman has traditionally played the role of mediator between Washington and Tehran. Qatar is also now trying to help. Qatar's prime minister recently traveled to Tehran to discuss the war and the future of the strait. But diplomacy is running into a major obstacle. Trump does not appear interested in returning to the framework negotiated with Iran earlier this year. That earlier arrangement was supposed to create a pathway toward reopening Hormuz, addressing Iran's nuclear program, and providing sanctions relief. Instead, the agreement collapsed. And now Washington appears to believe that economic pressure can force Tehran back to the negotiating table from a much weaker position. Trump says Iran is already in deep trouble. Iran, however, insists that sanctions and military pressure will not force it to surrender, and history gives Tehran some reason to believe that it can survive extraordinary pressure. But survival comes with a cost. Iran's currency has collapsed. Inflation has surged. Fuel shortages have appeared in parts of the country, and U.S. sanctions have severely reduced Iran's ability to sell oil through normal channels. The pressure is real. The question is whether it is enough to force Iran to accept Washington's demands. So far, the answer appears to be no. In fact, Tehran is threatening to escalate if the blockade continues. Rezai has warned that Iran could target U.S. economic interests if Washington maintains the blockade. That raises the possibility of a dangerous cycle. Washington increases economic pressure. Iran retaliates against shipping. The United States responds by tightening the blockade. and every new step makes diplomacy harder. There is also a massive global risk. The Strait of Hormuz is not simply a line on a map. It is one of the arteries of the global economy. If shipping remains severely restricted, oil and gas prices can rise, supply chains can become more expensive, and countries thousands of kilometers from the Middle East can feel the impact. And the longer the crisis continues, the greater the pressure on governments to choose sides. That is precisely why Qatar, Oman, and Pakistan have all been pushing for some form of diplomatic off-ramp. But right now, Washington and Tehran are talking past each other. Trump says Iran is begging. Iran says the United States must prove its seriousness. Trump says the blockade is working. Iran says it can still deny Washington a normal Hormuz. And both sides believe time may be on their side. That may be the most dangerous part of this entire standoff, because neither Washington nor Tehran appears ready to blink. The United States believes economic pressure can eventually force Iran to compromise. Iran believes that control over Hormuz gives it enough leverage to prevent Washington from dictating the terms of the war's end. And somewhere between those two calculations lies the future of one of the world's most important waterways. For now, the Strait of Hormuz may be technically open, but it is nowhere near normal. And until Washington and Tehran agree on who controls the rules of passage, what happens to the blockade, and what concessions each side is willing to make, the crisis is far from over.
Hi, I'm Admiral Brad Cooper, Commander of U.S. Central Command, here with an operational update on two ongoing missions in the Middle East. Many of our 50,000 U.S. troops operating across the region are doing outstanding work executing the naval blockade against Iran while maintaining commercial traffic flow through the Strait of Hormuz. As recently announced, the U.S. military has achieved a major milestone in the Strait of Hormuz. We have successfully cleared sea mines in the Strait's international shipping lanes that were laid months ago by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Internationally recognized transit routes in the Strait are free of Iranian sea mines thanks to the incredible work of the U.S. military. Let's take a look at exactly what this means. Here's a nautical chart of the Strait of Hormuz and surrounding seas. It's frequently used by mariners around the world and clearly identifies the internationally recognized traffic separation scheme, which you see labeled on the chart as TSS. A traffic separation scheme is a highway system for ships on the ocean. Here on the chart, a dividing line is shown and placed between lanes with opposing traffic directions to keep ships safely apart in the narrow waterway. These are the long-standing lanes international shipping has historically used to transit the Strait of Hormuz. And over the past few months, our forces meticulously and quietly cleared them of sea mine threats using a combination of Navy divers, Navy SEALs, and U.S. air power from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. The circumstances were challenging and dangerous to say the least, but we got the job done. Bottom line, today, international shipping lanes are open and momentum is building. Over the past several months, U.S. forces have assisted nearly 1,500 commercial vessels in transiting the Strait by providing coordinated protection. Those ships were carrying nearly 750 million barrels of crude oil destined for global energy markets, which is a massive volume. And while American forces have supported 750 million barrels of crude oil leaving the Gulf, Iran has exported zero oil from its shores since we resumed the naval blockade in mid-July. We have been highly effective. No ships have entered or left an Iranian port without our permission, and we have only allowed ships to pass through on humanitarian grounds, which is a credit to the dedication and professionalism of our sailors, Marines, and airmen in particular, executing this complex mission. Since resuming the blockade, thousands of U.S. service members operating more than 20 warships and hundreds of aircraft have sustained our success, turning around 75 vessels attempting to run the blockade and disabling 3 vessels that did not comply when directed. CENTCOM forces have demonstrated time and time again that we are laser focused on this mission. We remain vigilant, lethal, and resolved. During a recent trip to the region, I saw firsthand how our brave men and women continue to answer the call. I had the privilege to recognize and thank our troops personally for their extraordinary service. We've asked them to stay ready, and that's exactly what they are doing. I just could not be prouder of their efforts, and I know that the American people share that same pride. So to all our service members, keep up the great work. Continue to take care of one another, and Godspeed. Thanks so much.